Imagine if your primary plan fails during a critical moment. Are you prepared for that scenario? It's a thought that can make the best of us break out in a cold sweat. But today we're going to explore a strategy that can help you sleep a little easier. Enter the PACE method. Stemming from military origins, PACE stands for primary, alternate, contingency, and emergency. Each letter represents a layer of planning, a backup to your backup, if you will. The beauty of the PACE method lies in its simplicity and versatility. It can be applied to any area of preparedness, from communication to food supply, from water sourcing to finding shelter. By mastering the PACE method, you're not just preparing for a single scenario, but rather, you're building a robust system that can withstand multiple failures. In this video, we'll break down the PACE method to ensure you're prepared for any situation. Let's start from the basics. What is the PACE method? Picture a layered approach to planning, a sort of safety net woven from multiple contingencies. This is the essence of the PACE method, an acronym that stands for primary, alternate, contingency, and emergency. Each of these words represents a layer of your plan, starting with your most trusted, reliable method, and ending with your last resort. Your primary plan is your go-to, the method you rely on most frequently. It's the everyday plan, the one that works under normal circumstances. But what if normal goes out the window? That's where your alternate comes in. This is your backup, the plan you turn to when your primary doesn't cut it. It's the trusty sidekick, ready to step in when the hero needs a break. But sometimes even your sidekick might falter. Enter the contingency. This is your plan C, the one you resort to when both your primary and alternate fail. It's not as convenient, not as easy, but it's there, ready to be deployed when you need it. And then there's the emergency plan. This is your last resort, the plan you turn to when all else fails. It's there to be used in the most dire circumstances, when time is of the essence and there's no room for error. Now you might be thinking, why would I need all these plans? Isn't one enough? Well, let's put it this way. The PACE method was born out of military strategy, where redundancy can mean the difference between success and failure, or even life and death. It's about being prepared for every possible scenario, because when it comes to survival, there's no such thing as being too prepared. In other words, Pennsylvania. CE is all about having not just one, but multiple plans in place. It's a strategy that gives you the confidence to face any situation, knowing that you've got a plan, and then some, ready to roll. Now that we know what PACE stands for, let's dive into each component. PACE is an acronym that stands for primary, alternate, contingency, and emergency. Each of these represents a different level of preparedness, providing a layered approach to ensure you're ready for anything that comes your way. Let's start with primary. Your primary plan is your go-to, your first line of action. It's the most preferred and reliable method. For example, in a communication scenario, your cell phone would typically be your primary method. It's convenient, efficient, and most likely, it's what you use every day. Next, we have alternate. This is your plan B, your backup in case your primary plan fails. It's your secondary method that you can switch to without too much inconvenience. In our communication example, a landline phone would be a suitable alternate. It's a different method, but still reliable and relatively easy to use. Now let's talk about contingency. This is your third line of defense, your backup plan if both your primary and alternate methods fail. It's less convenient and perhaps less reliable, but it's still a viable option. For communication, a two-way radio could serve as a great contingency method. It's not as easy or convenient as a cell phone or landline, but it can certainly get the job done when the other options aren't available. Last, but by no means least, we have emergency. This is your last resort, your final plan when all other options have failed. It's what you turn to when the situation is dire and you need a solution, no matter how inconvenient or unconventional. In the case of communication, signal flares or messengers could be your emergency plan. They're not ideal and certainly not convenient, but they're better than having no plan at all. These four levels of PACE, primary, alternate, contingency, and emergency create a comprehensive approach to preparedness. They provide a roadmap, a step-by-step guide to navigate through any situation. The beauty of the PACE system is its flexibility. It can be applied to any aspect of preparedness, from communication to food supply, water supply, shelter, and beyond. It's a method that encourages redundancy, ensuring you always have another plan to fall back on. But remember, having a PACE plan isn't just about listing 4 different methods for each scenario. It's about understanding each method, knowing how and when to use it, and regularly practicing and updating your plans. It's about being proactive, not reactive. So take the time to think about your PACE plans. Consider your options for each level and ensure they're realistic and achievable. And most importantly, don't wait until it's too late to start planning. The best time to prepare is now. Remember, from primary to emergency, each level of PACE is crucial to your overall preparedness. It's not just about having a plan, it's about having multiple plans, each one ready to step in when the one before it fails. That's the power of the PACE method, and that's how you achieve ultimate preparedness. Now let's see how we can apply the PACE method to different scenarios. Remember, this is all about having a multi-layered approach to preparedness. The key is to always have a backup plan and then a backup to that backup and so on. First up, let's talk about communication. Your primary method could be your cell phone. It's portable, convenient, and most of us are rarely without it. But what if the cell towers go down? Or there's a power outage? That's where your alternate method comes in. A landline phone could serve this purpose. Yes, they may seem old-fashioned, but landlines can often work even when cell service is down. But what if both these methods fail? You need a contingency plan. A two-way radio can serve this purpose. They don't rely on external networks and can provide local communication. Last but not least, for emergencies, we need a last-ditch option. Signal flares or sending messengers could be considered here. Next, let's consider water supply. Your primary source is probably the municipal water supply. It's reliable and convenient. But if that fails, you need an alternate source. Home water storage, like a rain barrel system or bottled water, can work well here. For a contingency plan, a water filtration system could be used to purify water from natural sources. In dire emergencies, you may have to resort to boiling or chemically purifying water to make it safe to drink. Now, let's think about food supply. Your primary source is probably just regular grocery shopping. But what if the stores are closed or supplies run low? An alternate method could be long-term food storage. This includes canned goods, freeze-dried meals, and other non-perishable items. Your contingency plan could be home gardening. You'd be surprised how much food you can produce in a small space. Lastly, in an emergency, you may have to resort to foraging or hunting for food. Lastly, let's look at shelter. Your primary shelter is your home. But if for some reason you can't stay there, you need an alternate. This could be a friend's or family member's house. For a contingency plan, consider a pre-arranged safe house or location. And in an emergency situation, temporary shelters like tents or makeshift structures could be your last resort. Remember, the goal here is not to scare you, but to stress the importance of being prepared. The PACE method helps you plan for the unexpected and ensures that you have several layers of plans in place. It's not about expecting the worst, but being ready for it, just in case. The PACE method is versatile and works well with any scenario, as you can see. By thinking ahead and having multiple plans, you can navigate through any situation with more confidence and less panic. It's all about being proactive rather than reactive. So, take some time to think about your own PACE plan. What's your primary method? What's your alternate, your contingency, your emergency? Remember, hope for the best, but always plan for the worst. So, how do you start implementing the PACE method? Well, the first step is to identify your critical areas. These are the areas you absolutely cannot afford to fail. Think of them as your bare basics, the things you need to survive. This could be your communication, water, food, and shelter. Once you've identified these areas, it's time to develop your primary plans. This is your P in PACE. Your primary plans are your most reliable go-to methods. For instance, your cell phone would be your primary plan for communication, your municipal water supply for water, regular grocery shopping for food, and your home for shelter. Next, it's time to establish your alternate plans. These are your backup methods if your primary ones fail. It's your A in PACE. If your cell phone fails, maybe you have a landline. If the municipal water supply is compromised, perhaps you have a home water storage system. If you can't get to the grocery store, you might have long-term food storage. And if you can't stay in your home, you could stay at a friend or family member's house. Moving on, you'll want to create your contingency plans. These are your backup to your backup, your C in PACE. If your cell phone and landline fail, you might have a two-way radio. If your municipal water supply and home water storage fail, you could have a water filtration system. If you can't get to the grocery store and your long-term food storage runs out, you might have a home garden. And if you can't stay at your home or a friend or family member's house, you might have a pre-arranged safe house. Finally, you'll need to prepare your emergency plans. These are your last resort strategies, your E in PACE. If your cell phone, landline, and two-way radio fail, you could have signal flares or messengers. If your municipal water supply, home water storage, and water filtration system fail, you could boil or chemically purify water. If you can't get to the grocery store, your long-term food storage runs out, and your home garden fails, you might have to resort to foraging and hunting. And if you can't stay at your home, a friend or family member's house, or a prearranged safe house, you might have to seek out temporary shelters. Now, having these plans in place is great, but they're only as good as your ability to execute them. And that's why the last step is to regularly review and update your plans. Make sure you're familiar with each plan and that you practice them regularly. You don't want to be figuring out how to use a two-way radio or purify water for the first time in an emergency situation. Remember, the key to implementing PACE is regular review and practice. Before we wrap up, here are some practical tips and best practices when using the PACE method. Firstly, never underestimate the power of good documentation. Keep a written record of your PACE plans. This should include details of your primary, alternate, contingency, and emergency methods for each critical area. These records should be accessible, easy to understand, and regularly updated. Remember, your plan is only as good as its latest version. Secondly, training is key. Knowing what to do is one thing, but being able to execute your plan under pressure is another. Regularly practice using all PACE levels. This will not only ensure you're familiar with your plans, but will also highlight any areas that need improvement. Practice makes perfect, and this is no exception. The third tip is to embrace redundancy. It might seem counterintuitive, but when it comes to preparedness, more is often better. Redundancy is the art of having multiple backups. So if one method fails, you have others to fall back on. For example, in addition to your primary, alternate, and contingency methods, you could have additional emergency methods. Remember, the goal is to prevent a single point of failure. The fourth and final tip is to network. The PACE method is not just about individual preparedness. It's about community resilience. Collaborate with community members to coordinate your plans. Share resources, knowledge, and skills. Your community could be your family, friends, neighbors, or even online groups. These tips will help make your PACE planning more effective and efficient. Remember, the goal is not to predict the future, but to be prepared for it. The PACE method is a tool to help you achieve that. So, whether you're preparing for a natural disaster, a power outage, or any other unforeseen event, remember the PACE method. Remember the importance of having a primary, alternate, contingency, and emergency plan. And remember the practical tips and best practices we've discussed today. In the end, preparedness is not about fearing the unknown. It's about embracing the certainty that you have done everything you can to be ready. It's about the peace of mind that comes from knowing you're prepared. So, go forth and prepare. And remember, the best time to start is now. That's a wrap on the PACE method. We've journeyed together from understanding what PACE stands for, primary, alternate, contingency, emergency, straight to how to apply it to various critical areas such as communication, water, food, and shelter. We've seen how this method can be your guiding light, allowing you to always have a plan B, C, and even D. It's all about being prepared, having multiple layers of planning, and never finding yourself in a tight spot without a way out. Now it's your turn. Take the reins and start planning your own PACE strategies. Remember, the essence of readiness lies in the details. Foresight, preparation, and regular review and updating of your plans are the keys to mastering the PACE method. So, are you ready to take the challenge? We'd love to hear about your PACE plans in the comments below. Thank you for watching. We appreciate your time and hope you found this guide to mastering the PACE method helpful. If you did, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button. Also, make sure to ring that notification bell so you don't miss out on our next video where we'll dive deeper into implementing contingency plans. And remember, stay prepared.